you took the example of Amazon. Amazon took on Barnes and Noble, right? They were the biggest bookstore.
Yes, sir.
Now there was disruption. They disrupted the model by creating a platform which could have unlimited number of books sent from many places, dispatched from many places, or possibly from a central warehouse. So there was a business model innovation which destroyed the monopoly. Now tell me, from your study, if you look at the companies who have become near monopolies, and monopoly is not exactly a good word today, any time, all around the world. Do you think hubris will set in a new business model driven to technology innovation and business model innovation can destroy them?
So Mr. Pai, I think the core point is hubris. So one of the things we look for is we look at the promoter's lifestyle very carefully. So if the promoter, is doing sort of ostentatious things, big houses, big cars, owning Formula One teams and football teams and so on, we tend to get very wary because those are all signs of hubris. If you see India's greatest monopolists, they keep a low profile. They will drive a low-cost car. I'm not saying low-cost in the sense of Swift Desire, but they'll be doing a Toyota Innova or a Toyota Camry. Right? Very few monopolists will have a German BMW or a Mercedes. They will not be buying cricket teams or football teams. They will not be appearing in movie premieres with film stars. Right? So it's very, very interesting. The psychological traits of a monopolist are around keeping himself focused and grounded rather than getting caught up in the media hype. Now, this relates to the other point you made, sir. A monopolist who endures is one who has relentless hunger. If I was to go to meet Harsh Mariwala, sir, today, he will discuss capital allocation with me just as intensely today as he would have done 20 years ago, because he's just as hungry to grow Marico, or if I go to see the Pidilite promoters, their hunger for growth is intact. They might have bought in professional management to drive the execution better, but the great monopolist avoids hubris. By avoiding hubris, you keep yourself hungry. If you keep yourself hungry, this country gives you endless growth opportunities, right? But it's the hard part is keeping yourself hungry, because it's very easy in India to say, I made $1 billion or $2 billion, let me now go and enjoy.
Now let me carry that forward again. Is it multi-generational or is limited to one generation?
Yeah, so second generation. So even with the best Indian companies, typically the second generation is a challenge. So one of the things we look at very carefully is succession planning. What we are finding is an example, shining example is Asian Paints. The greatest monopolistic franchises have very good succession planning. And this has two layers to it. One is bringing in professional management and handing over the running of the company to professional management. So Asian Paints, the first professional CEO, I think, came in the 70s. Mr. Singhal, who's the recently appointed CEO, I think is the 9th or 10th professional CEO. Asian Paints CEOs change. Nobody even knows. The media doesn't run headline stories saying Asian Paints CEO change. Asian Paints doubles its market cap every 3 to 3.5 years, and they've done so for 40 years. Right? So this is a company where the promoters have institutionalized succession planning. The third generation of Asian Paint promoters own the company. The 7th or 8th generation of management is running the company. Right, the country the Economic Times doesn't run a front page story because it's par for the course. Right, I think Asian Paints is a shining example. Let's hope HDFC Bank also becomes a shining example. I'm hoping because it's part of my portfolio. But I also have to admit this is exceptional, not par for the course. Par for the course is the first generation builds it. They then die on the job. They die on the job, and the sons and daughters then squabble over the inheritance and mess it up.
Society does not consider or look at monopolists very easily. Monopolies are a big danger to society. We're seeing the rise of digital monopolies globally, and they're becoming a very big danger because they're killing competition.
Right.
Now, how do you think competition law is required to keep them in check? Keep them in check so that they don't distort the market.
Right.
Now, it's quite possible that because of their distribution, their money power, they could destroy the competition by, targeting the competition in areas where they got bigger business, discounting in a particular market, etc., doing many things. We've seen this kind of behavior across many industries in the past. So how should society react to build-ups of such monopolies? And also, Saurabh, monopolies have obscene profits. Now, we cannot say the profits are the result of greater efficiency, lower cost of capital. The profits also could be the result of many other reasons. Abnormal pricing in markets where there is less competition, or possibly monopoly in purchasing raw material because they are very, very large and everybody wants a discount to get business with them. So these two things, how do you protect society from the negative impact of monopolies, and how should competition law play this well?
So it's a deep subject. I'll offer my 10 cents worth on this. I think a big challenge for all of us in having this dialogue is unwittingly, perhaps, we are all tainted by the legacy of socialism. Right? The legacy of socialism is that the government and public sector can do immense good, and private sector capitalists.
No, I'm not talking the public sector. I'm talking as a genuine capitalist.
I'll come to it, sir. I'll come to it. And the null hypothesis tends to be that public sector can do good and private sector capitalists are going to loot us all. In reality, what's very interesting is in India, the typical monopolist hikes prices by 1 to 2%. Right. So initially I couldn't fathom this, that if you are the market leader, you have 95% share. Why don't you let your prices go up, make a lot of money? And then a wise monopolist 5 years ago explained it to me, right? This is a challenge when you don't come from business family. I come from a middle class family. So this monopolist sat me down and said, look, Saurabh, this is how it works. CPI inflation in India is 6%. If I hike my prices by 1 to 2%, every year I suffocate the competition's profit margins by 4%, 6 minus 2, 4. Over 5 years, I bankrupt my competition. So the great monopolists in our country actually give their customers a super deal, not because they're trying to do good for the customer, but because they're trying to make it impossible for anybody else to enter. Right? Now, a more interesting question is what's happening with, say, Google in America. If we were to take my point of view and apply it to Google will say, look, our search is free. Mohandas Pai, Saurabh Mukherjea can get all this brilliant free search, right? As you know, the American Department of Justice is saying, aha, your search is free, but you're using your search engine to destroy competition, right? As yet, so that's basically using your monopoly in one area to grow into an adjacency. In our country, we haven't seen that much of it. My reckoning is it will come in the next 10, 20 years, right? We haven't seen the use of profits, 40, 45% ROC, supernormal profits in vertical X to go into vertical X plus 1. As and when it happens, it will become a very interesting paradigm because it will, in a way, Mr. Pai, it will take us back to conglomerate era, right? What we are seeing in front of us is the death, there's a gradual decline of the Indian conglomerate, because they were created in a very different era. If we start seeing Indian conglomerates using cash flow in vertical X to go into vertical X plus 1, it will be returned to the conglomerate era. And my reading of the Indian economy is it's not clear to me that this will happen. At the moment, the Indian monopolist, ironically, is giving the customer a fabulous deal for his own selfish benefit, which is to destroy the competition. And as we all know, the public sector enterprises struggle to do this because they simply don't have the return on capital of 45% to drive efficiency gains and suffocate the competition.
Do you think these monopolies that you point out actually expanded the market?
To the extent that the monopolist uses his high free cash flow to invest heavily in distribution and in sales and marketing, right? So if you see the baby milk powder market, 97% is controlled by Nestle. Right now, Nestle is almost basically the entire Indian baby milk powder industry is Nestle. So they have propagated the product deep into the countryside. Their distributors, their wholesalers have propagated the product, and therefore, it's self-explanatory here that without Nestle, we simply wouldn't be selling as much of the product had it not been for this Swiss giant. Right? It's easy to sort of turn this into a negative example. My view is we've seen enough of the righteousness that comes with our socialist baggage from India's first, from the whole era of 1947 on through to the mid 80s. My view is that we tried our best with the socialist model. It didn't take us very far. It seems to me that capitalism or the rise of the Indian monopolist is giving the Indian consumer and the Indian economy a better deal.
Now, tell me one thing. If you look at financial services, Bajaj obviously has got higher ROI. You got State Bank of India with the lowest cost of deposits, lowest cost of borrowing.
Yes, sir.
With the fantastic reach.
Yes, sir.
Now with, good technology.
Yes, sir.
Correct? But somehow the mindset.
Yes.
The mindset is a very different mindset.
Yeah.
Now, don't you think if people study your thesis, State Bank of India should be able to expand their marketplace because they got everything in their favor, including very good people in management, as compared to a Bajaj. Now, Bajaj is obviously got the biggest competition for Bajaj in the public sector, very efficient banking. Second, Bajaj has got a AAA rating, so the lowest cost of money. But during the downturn, Bajaj still have 8 to 9% NPA because they took great risks despite all the technology, right? So do you think the availability of a public sector as a competitor also will give such kind of what you call monopolies in your word a big advantage to compete?
Yeah. So let's use this example. It's a fine example. So in the last 20 years, and listeners can go and check the data, State Bank of India's return on equity hasn't exceeded their cost of equity in a single year, right? So State Bank of India necessarily has been financed by all of us on this Zoom call paying income taxes to the government of India. The government of India takes our hard-earned money and puts it in State Bank of India's balance sheet, and they then go and lend the money. Next year they have another deficit, and that's how the State Bank of India machine runs. And indeed, the entire public sector banking runs like that.
So it's just the pricing. If you look at State Bank of India, the price very low. I mean, I have a quarrel with them. Why do the price so low, whereas Bajaj prices to market?
Right. So I'll come to that, right? So even if you adjust for their NPAs from, say, agriculture sector loans, even if you take specific segments of their business, right, it's not apparent to me. So, for example, last 4 or 5 years, the capex cycle in India hasn't really been running hard. So it's not apparent to me that State Bank of India should have this sort of low profitability. So even in standard business, standard retail banking business, they're not able to match a HDFC Bank. So then, to your point, we looked at very hard as to why this happens. Why can't State Bank of India, given their branch network, their technology, their fine management, why can't they compete with HDFC Bank at the branch? And a big part of it, Mr. Pai, comes down to incentives, right? Whether it's a HDFC Bank or a Bajaj Finance, the junior management is incentivized to perform. If they perform, they get rewarded. If they don't perform, they're fired. Right. So as Aditya Puri narrated in one of his final interviews, he narrated a lovely story about Coorg. I'd gone to Coorg last year and I saw the HDFC Bank there, so I could relate to it. He said, Aditya Puri Saab said in his interview that he asked the manager in Coorg, what do you need to double the business in the next 2 years? The Coorg manager said, sir, I just need 2 things. Give me an ATM at one end of Coorg and give me a correspondent bank relationship at the other end of Coorg. That's all I need. I will double the business for you, right? And as we have found out in our study of HDFC Bank, they allow you to set high targets for yourself. If you hit those targets, you make very high rewards. If you don't hit those targets, you're shown the door. If we could replicate that construct in State Bank of India, I am very, very confident you'll get the same results.